Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
Doing good. While everybody's listening to this, it will be Wednesday, so hump day. We made it.
Yeah.
Or made it past hump day anyways, but really close to the trade deadline. So obviously just with the Flyers and the position that they're in, a lot of rumors swirling, specifically around Scott Laughton,
Yes.
potentially even, Rasmus Ristolainen in play, maybe even some players we're not aware of. So just with the trade deadline coming up on Friday at 3 p.m., really exciting time for the hockey season. Tons of rumors, even trades, trickling in today. So we're gonna have a really fun episode. Just that's very trade centric. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, brother. I'm doing well. Yeah, so this episode, like Vasily was saying, is going to be all like just deep dive nerd stuff. So if you guys are watching on YouTube, that is the best experience. If you're listening, I would recommend putting on the YouTube version, but we'll try to do as best as we can to verbalize what we're showing on screen so you can follow along just with the audio. But this is definitely going to be a more video centric episode just because I'm going to do some screen sharing. We're going to talk about Michkov. We're going to talk about the potential deals that the Flyers can make here at the trade deadline. We don't know anything for sure. Then we're going to go deep dive into next year's roster, and that's going to tie into the type of moves that the Flyers can make, not just at the trade deadline, but going into next season. So we're going to, we took some guesses at, cap hits and stuff like that, and just kind of give everybody a real full view of what the roster not could look like, because we know there are changes coming, but what the landscape is moving forward right now and why they would look to make, right? We're going to go into the why of everything. Then the second half is going to be all recent trade deadline talk. We'll look at the trades that were made. If there are any trades that pop up during this podcast, we'll have an updated version of that too. So, and we're just going to react to some of those deals. And this is just going to be all trade deadline talk. Because let's be honest, it's what's on everybody's mind right now. Considering the Flyers are not really out of it for the playoffs, but the odds are not that high. A lot of people are more buying into the draft. Again, we've been talking about how big of a draft this is going to be. So this is going to be kind of our entire focus on the episode. Real Flyers nerd stuff today. So hopefully you guys are strapped in for that one. Okay, before we get started, just want to remind everybody who's listening to please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell here on YouTube to get notified when we release our episodes. Again, we kind of throw random days at you a little bit. Usually between Monday and Wednesday we record, or Sunday and Wednesday now. So this one we're recording on a Wednesday, so it helps kind of keep track of our schedule. We're trying to be more consistent, but it's hard sometimes. Also, for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a follow there if you can. That is the best way to support our podcast, is just subscribing to us, following us, ratings, the thumbs up, the whole shebang is really the best way to support our podcast. And also, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Go to Jim Steaks. The weather's getting a little bit nicer now, so waiting outside in line isn't as bad. Go to Jim Steaks, get yourself a cheesesteak. They are delicious. Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment need. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company and make sure you get the best claim possible, and they will deal with all of the headaches that come with dealing with insurance companies. It's just worth it. Dealing with insurance sucks. So they'll make sure it's an easier process, and that it takes all the question marks out of it. So again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize it by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. The link is in the description. They are our partners. Our stuff is pinned at the top, so make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. All right, let's get right into it because we've kind of been talking about this episode for like 3 days already, and we really want to get into it. So, just a little bit of Flyers news. This is a little bit old news as we're already into the heart of March, it being March 5th right now. And Michkov did just put up a point the other night, had a goal taken away, as Couturier is actually the one on a review who ended up putting the puck fully past the line, but he did get himself an assist. Michkov was named the rookie of the month in February. That's his second rookie of the month of the season. I will say, in the time that I've been watching the Flyers, I have never seen a rookie do that. Not at least since the Eric Lindros days have we had somebody who has been this big of an impact. He is already 3 points behind Simone Gagne and still has 20, what is it, 20 games left? 22 games?
Oh,
No, 20 games.
that's a good question. Yeah, I
I think
believe
it's 20
games.
games. Yeah, 20 games left, so he will for sure pass that, and hopefully he can hit a 60-point mark. We'll see what kind of speed he ramps up to, but I think anywhere between 55 and 60 points is definitely within his window. And this is the first time a Flyer has done that in 30 years. So incredibly impressive rookie season. Not surprising at all. This is kind of what we anticipated. And quite frankly, if he didn't have that slowdown kind of in between, he probably would be easily hitting 65 points, which is kind of where we had him at the beginning of the season.
I had him
And then
60 points around there. So
right,
yeah,
exactly.
it's I
So
mean, for right now, what he's done so far as a rookie, like even with that lull, right? Like he's played just so well. I mean, 19 goals, 26 assists, 45 points. He's right in that, middle of the Calder race with Lane Hudson and Macklin Celebrini. In the last 7 games, right, he's got 11 points. That kind of just shows the production he's been putting, forth here.
yeah.
He's been on a lot of nights, at least in my opinion, he's looked like their best player. There's a lot of really smart sequences. Confidence with the puck, taking the puck to the net and kind of being a guy that's willing to shoot whenever that lane opens up. I think we're seeing more comfortability with his shot, right? I think earlier in the season he was opting to pass a lot more, but now we're kind of
Yes,
seeing more of the shot and more of
it
that
was
shooting
frustrating me.
prowess. Yeah, so it's great to see that for Michkov. He's playing really well. 20 games left. So with the 45 points in 20 games, like I don't know if he's gonna put up a point a game or anything, but I think something like 15 points in maybe 20 games could be realistic for him. So 60
Yeah.
points potentially is possible just with the way he's been playing. So we'll just have to see if he can kind of get to that mark. But it's encouraging, especially after the little lull that he had, around the Christmas time. Getting this break obviously was really beneficial for him, and it kind of shows that and kind of affirms that playing so many games in such a short amount of time and just not really being used to a season like this definitely did affect him because you see how he, comes out of the break being rested and how well that he plays, right?
Well, while I do completely agree with that statement, it is weird that he actually heated up before the break,
Yeah, he was
like
looking
coming
good
into
before
the
as
break. But
well.
that also might have been. Torts has been saying this is more of a mental thing than a physical thing,
Hmm.
and maybe just seeing the home stretch there and knew he had a vacation. Again, he's
Get your
20
mind
years
off
old.
it.
Yeah, he's 20
Yeah.
years old. Like, it's a long, grueling season. I mean, it's long for us as viewers, right? Like, you can only imagine playing in all these games
And traveling.
as a young
And
man.
then just to add to before we end off and jump to the next topic, he actually, in terms of Flyers' best ever draft plus 2 point per game seasons, Michkov's actually third all time right now. And shout out to Alex Appleyard for the stat here. He's amazing on Twitter. Essentially, Michkov right now is third this season with a 0.75 points per game. The only players in Flyers history in a draft plus 2 to have more point per game than him would be Peter Zezel in 1984-85 with a 0.94 points per game, and then Eric Lindros in 1992-93 with a 1.23 points per game. So pretty great company for
Yeah,
Michkov to be a part of.
and again, Zezel was in the 80s when scoring was like even higher than it is today. And Lindros, I mean,
He was in a dead puck era essentially when he came in, so or very close
yeah,
to it.
but Lindros was the McDavid of his time.
Well, he was the
So,
next one, right?
right,
It's not surprising that he's topping that list.
right,
And it's even more impressive, like I said, the fact that he's doing it early 90s when after that 80s period, the scoring slows down a little bit. So
right.
just shows how much of a generational talent Lindros is,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it got worse as
The 90s
it
went
hit
on.
the 90s went on, and then the early 2000s when they had that lockout because it was just becoming like
clutching
guys just couldn't
traps.
score. It was like top scorers on your team had like 65, 70 points, you know.
Not ideal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do, and obviously things are going in the right direction now, at least with point production. Or
And goals.
yeah, like teams regularly have 90, 100 point guys. So they've definitely improved that with the rule changes. So yeah, Michkov has been incredibly impressive. He's had some lulls. His game has not been perfect. I'm very interested to see like if I look at what Tortorella did with Bobby Brink and what the coaching staff, not just Tortorella, what Brink did himself and what the staff did to modify Brink's game. And Brink is like a completely different player this year. Offensively, he's still like pretty similar to what he was, but just the two-way game, the tenacity, the smarts on the ice,
His forechecking ability, just winning board battles, all those
completely
things.
different guy.
Yeah, and if you look at the way that
Night and
Tortorella
day.
treated Brink in comparison to Michkov, it's similar, right? You
Very
see
similar.
a lot of cases last season where Bobby Brink was either sat for a period or benched for long stretches of the game. And it
Yeah.
was due to similar reasons, that Michkov would get sat, either like missing defensive coverages or maybe not being as engaged on the boards and battles and things like that. I think for Michkov, like the board battle thing isn't really a problem. Like he's pretty strong in the boards as a good stick. I think it's more just the coverages, like some
Yeah.
of the defensive mishaps. Obviously, Tortorella and the staff are trying to coach out of him. And to be honest, they've done a good job so far. You've seen a steady
Even
improvement. So
yeah, no, and Torts actually said that in the recent press conference that he said that like he actually didn't expect Mitch Cobb to respond as well as he has to the feedback and
yeah, and
to
that's with the kid
adjust as
not even
much.
knowing English. So imagine once
Right.
he actually picks up the language more, can understand it, how much more effective some of that criticisms will be, right? So
Yeah, because if he can improve his two-way play, like he just becomes astronomically more valuable to this team. Like,
Datsuk Light is always my comparison to
right.
Michkov.
So,
I
dude,
feel like those like just his stick and the way he can kind of anticipate, like it reminds me a bit of Datsuk. Obviously not the same in terms of defensive level prowess. Datsuk was elite Selkie winner. I don't think, Michkov's gonna get to that level. But just like we saw in, the last couple of games, there was even a stretch. I can't remember what game it was, but he stole the puck off somebody in the
it
neutral
was like two
zone.
games ago
Yeah,
or
came
something.
back, made a really sick play, and that like looked like Datsuk-esque, right? So like when you see him doing that so young, that just only cements the fact for me that he can probably expand that skill and get even better at doing stuff like that. So
Yeah. And we'll see if he has a sophomore slump or not. Again, like 95% of players tend to have a sophomore slump of some degree. But hopefully he doesn't, and
he
he
may
just
be an
comes in a
outlier.
better
Yeah.
player. Like Bobby Brink is not a sophomore slump, right?
Yeah.
Tyson Forrester did. He was struggling in the beginning of the year.
But he has turned it around, so
Right. Yes, it was very, very minor. Again, it depends, right? It's not like 100% rule, but
I would
there is a
argue.
struggle period in the second year,
No, it definitely
typically.
happens for a lot of players. I would argue though that with the way Michkov is, just his intensity level, the fact that he's so dedicated, seems to be a guy that's like a workhorse in terms of off ice workouts, but also on ice and practicing, puck skills, things like that. I just think with a guy like him, getting this season to understand the rigors of the NHL and having that first full off season will be probably really beneficial to his second
Huge.
season, right? So
Yeah.
I think maybe he might be able to even avoid it and kind of improve, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, like knowing what training camp is, having
Knowing
better
what to
English.
expect.
Like
Yeah.
even Connor Bedard, I wouldn't say he's in a sophomore slump because he's still having a great season, but he had a large slump there where like there were trade rumors and people talking about how he, all of a sudden diminishing his game, which we were making fun of on this podcast. But it's just so typical for a guy to come in his second year and just not hit the ground running or something, right? So
Yeah.
be ready for that, but hopefully it's doesn't exist or it's very minor. But you're right. I mean, I kind of been going into it also with the mindset of like, man, if you can like grab the bull by the horns this off season, like it doesn't matter if he actually wins the call. It would be cool if he wins the Calder, but it doesn't actually matter. It only matters if he evolves next year and moving forward. Like that's what matters. And the fact that he is already, again, we've talked about it before, 60 to 80 point or even 100 point, I guess, in some rare cases, but that 60 to 80 point range. And you look at who his line mates have been and what his ice time is like this year, 60 to 80 points, like that's in that, Nathan McKinnon type of range of like top five best players in the league have that type of rookie season, right? And Macklin Celebrini, very special player. I think Lane Hudson is really good. I'm a little hesitant to be like he's another Kale McCarr type just because they're all assists.
All
And
secondary assists, a lot of them
right.
too.
So
All of
so a
them,
lot
but
of it is like, he's got 4 goals on the year. It's like, is he, is he more just like a very good playmaker and skater, and he's going to be like an upper echelon offensive defenseman, but maybe not like a top 10 D man in the league? That remains to be seen. But he's obviously a special player. I don't want to diminish him, but I don't think he sits there with Celebrini and Michkov. I really think it's down to two guys, Michkov and Celebrini, and it kind of depends on what kind of finish
what they
Celebrini
both have,
has.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's
both of
going to be
them,
on
but
both of them, right? So
yeah,
we'll see. I
Celebrity's
just
so
think
good.
I
So
just
I,
think with
I
Celebrini, the Canadian factor and all the Canadian media, I think he might have an upper hand due to that,
he's also
which
very
is
good,
he is really good, but I just think
exceptional.
there might be a bit of a bias potentially, and
Sure.
that might
Yeah,
shift towards him. But we'll see though, right? Like you got to look at it from an objective perspective. Usually with the Calder race, typically the guy who has the most points gets that trophy. That's like mainly and usually what occurs, right? So
yeah.
if you're Michkov and you finish with the most points, it's going to put him in a pretty good spot. And I would also add that you can look at Michkov's season and say, hey, he faced some adversity, right? Like he had a lull and then bounced back. So
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a good point you bring up, but I don't I think there always is that Canadian bias thing, but I do think Celebrini is worthy of Rookie of the Year. I think he is exceptional.
he
Um,
deserves it. Yeah.
yeah,
I
like
think him and Michkov are, if either of them win, I think it would be well deserved, in my
yes,
opinion.
I think that those are your two best. I think Dustin Wolf is also a very good rookie goalie, but I think those are the two guys who are going to be in the future upper, like for sure, upper
I
echelon,
mean, if Calgary
top
gets in the
10 players in the
playoffs,
league.
if Calgary makes the playoffs, Wolf might be have more consideration. So we'll see.
Sure.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially considering that none of the other guys are going to be in the playoffs. I mean, the odds are Lane Hudson will not either.
Yeah.
Though I'm
Well,
very
my
interested to
thought
see how
is,
he evolves too. Lane Hudson is a player. He's an amazing
oh
skater.
yeah, well, that's a lot of skill. I was just meaning with the Calgary thing, like, um,
I don't think
you
they're going
know,
to make the playoffs
I
though.
don't know if they're gonna make it, but yeah, like they're right on the bubble there, and if they do, it's gonna be probably largely due to him and his goaltending, because he's been really, really good for them. So
I mean, technically, the Flyers are what, 4 points out of a playoff spot or something like that.
yeah, but they got like six teams
Crazy.
to jump, so that's
Yeah,
the
and they
problem,
also
right?
have played more games. They don't have the best winning percentage.
It's just
Um,
it's a tough task.
like
For them to make it in, they'd have to go on a heater and win like 8 in a row.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to. Yeah, all right, we're gonna get into it. Actually, let's just get right into it. So, there have been rumors circling for a while now, and both of these have been going on for a very long time. And Rasmus Ristolainen being one of the names that have been out there, and the other being Scott Lawton. Let's address the Risto stuff first before we get into the fun stuff. Again, I'm not in the camp. I don't think the Flyers are trying to trade Risto. I think we all heard online. I think Charlie O'Connor pointed out, Kevin Kurz pointed it out, that there isn't like a lot of offers on the table for Risto. I don't really think he's being shopped. I really don't think the Flyers are that interested in moving him. I think a lot of people are still kind of living in the Fletcher era and have just judged Risto for the very beginning. It's like, again, I would much rather move Nick Seeler. Like, I get that people want the return, but he's just not the type of player that I think is easy to replace. I do think there would easily be suitors. I don't think his salary cap is an issue. His cap hit, I think he makes what he should be making. So I don't think it's the money that's the problem. Maybe it's tough for teams to fit him now, and the Flyers are not going to retain. So it's like, but I don't think like an off-season trade would be a problem or anything.
It
I
could
don't
just
think.
be the contract in the sense that there's a couple of years left. Maybe teams aren't ready to pencil him in just because they're not sure of what their books or what their
Yeah,
situation is going to be, right?
yeah, that might be the case, but I don't think anything about his play says that he is not worth the money he's being paid.
No, I think
Let's
he can definitely
say
be
that.
traded if they were looking to shop him. I think they're just in a situation with Ristolainen in the sense that, hey, if a team comes around and blows them away with an offer and really exceeds what they're looking for, I think they would make a deal potentially. I just think at this point they probably realize with a couple seasons left on his contract, you can just retain him. He might be valuable for you in the next couple of seasons as well because you might potentially be making that push to becoming a playoff team. And then in a couple seasons when he is on an expiring deal, maybe he becomes even more attractive to move, especially if the play he's had so far continues, right? Like you just have to think about how he's rehabilitated his game from Buffalo to Philadelphia. He's
Yeah.
really gotten a lot better in terms of defensive play, shutting plays down on the boards, being just in general a lot more steady in his own end. Whereas in the past, he was known and prone to, either turn the puck over a lot or be missing coverages, which a lot of that and essentially all of that is out of his game, right? I can't even think to a play where he's missed a coverage in the last couple seasons or gotten beaten completely or turnstile or
No.
anything like that, right? So
Yeah.
we've seen his play take a complete 180 from where it was in Buffalo and Philadelphia under Shaw and Torts. And if you look at the metrics, if you just look at the eye test and the way he's been playing, that also, is something that can be seen, right? So I just think for Ristolainen, they're not in a rush. If a team is willing to, overpay, they might potentially listen and make the deal, but they realize that, hey, our chance to trade him might be next season or the season after when he's an expiring contract.
Yeah, I'm also not convinced that they want to trade him at all. I look at
Well,
the
you
fact
heard
that
what
they
Tort said in that presser, right?
yeah. But even beyond that, I just look at the type. Okay, you re-sign Nick Seeler because he's a physical defenseman who fits the identity of this team. You extended Garnet Hathaway because he's a physical player and he fits the identity of this team. What about Risto says that he doesn't fit the identity of this team and he's the same age as Garnet Hathaway? He's younger than Nick Seeler. Like again, Nick Seeler, in my opinion, you want to
he's
free
a
up some
higher
cap space.
yeah, but and to your point, he brings those elements of tenacity and physicality you want from those guys, but he's also a guy that can play higher for you in the lineup. So think about the impact he can
And
have.
you have
Yeah,
no
bringing that
replacement.
that's what I mean, bringing that physicality, but then also being a guy that can play on that second pair. Even in the first pair role, if somebody gets injured, we saw him step up earlier this season and look really good. So I just think for him and just with the way the Flyers have kind of addressed him being traded, like I go back to Tortorella's press conference, I
Yeah,
believe,
2
way
weeks
earlier
ago,
this
whatever.
week. I think it
Yeah,
was earlier this week or maybe
yeah,
even last
maybe.
week, but he essentially just stated, like a lot of the Philly media, I believe Charlie O'Connor, Kevin Kurz, Jackie Spiegel were all kind of prompting questions about Ristolainen getting traded, and he kind of just said, "Is Rist still getting traded? Is there something that I'm not aware
Right.
of?"
That
Right?
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think that's the comment that I was saying. Like, people are still, we've been talking about this for a while. People are living in the past with Risto. Like, they're
Yeah.
projecting their feelings for when Fletcher, which, by the way, Fletcher paid that much because there was a bidding war for
Other
Risto.
teams wanted him. Yeah, other teams wanted it.
Yes.
But
And now he's better.
my point is that Tortorella made and what he said in his comment is that, hey, most teams in the NHL are looking for big right-handed, right-shot defensemen. What is Rasmus Ristolainen? A big right-handed, right-shot defenseman that can play 18 minutes plus for you on your second pair, could step up and even play on the top pair, could play power play, could play penalty kill. If you trade a guy like that away, guess what? You're looking for another guy that can do exactly that, which you don't have in the
Right.
system. You're just going to go out on the free agent market and end up paying more due to the cap going up for the same exact player,
Yes.
maybe even a worse player potentially, right? So
Yes. Now, I think if there was an overpayment for Risto, I think they would, or even giving the Flyers the value of what they traded for him, which was a
exactly,
lot. I
exactly.
think they would do that. But unless that's the actual offer, I don't think, and I think that's why teams are like, okay, the Flyers are not interested in moving him. I'm gonna have to pay extra to do it.
And I have 2 years of him after, exactly.
Yeah. I don't think that's the issue though, dude. I really
No,
don't.
I don't believe that's an issue. I'm just saying there might be other teams that are cup contenders that are right up to the cap, and they're just like, hey, I can't pencil this guy in for 2 years because I just don't know what I'm doing with my team.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that because I do agree with that. But if you look at the UFA market, that you are going to be paying at the very least that much for a worse defenseman.
Oh yeah, of course.
So
I just mean
there,
there might be teams in the thinking process or in the thought process of, hey, we're a contender. All we can do is afford to acquire guys on expiring deals. We cannot acquire guys
sure,
with
yeah,
term,
yeah.
right? So
That's why I don't disagree with what you said. I think there is wisdom in what you said, but I don't think that that's the only reason. I think the Flyers are really just not that interested in moving him.
yeah,
Again,
unless it's a complete, offer that blows their socks off. I
right.
totally
That
agree.
it's like, hey, it's a mid first round pick. It's like, oh,
Prospect,
yeah, it's like a really good prospect that we wanted and a first
mid
round
first
pick.
rounder. Yeah.
Right. We're getting something that we're like, okay, we have to make this move because this is a move that's probably not going to come around a lot.
And
Right.
it'll help us in the future. Exactly.
Right. Right. So like that would make sense, but anything out of that, like again, I don't think it's coincidence that there's no offers because I don't think they're shopping him. I think they're probably asking for a lot, and teams are like, okay, well, that's not the type of trade we're looking to make right now. We're
Yeah.
looking to, we're just looking to bolster our blue line for this playoff run, right? So he's not even. I don't even think he fits that category unless you want to be like, okay, we are taking Risto for the next 3 years or whatever, two plus years here, and we want him in our top four. That's the guy we identified, and we're willing to pay to do it. And we're gonna go through trades later, and you can see like people are spending a lot to get assets. So it's like I don't think it's so much a problem of cost. I think it's actually on the Flyers. So let's talk about the main one, and this is the one that again, I said this in the preseason that I felt like this was the year to move Laughton. I think we both kind of agreed that it was a somewhat high likelihood this year. Still not 100% it's going to happen, but according to Darren Dreger, he had a tweet, and you can take this however you want, whether the Flyers release this information to him or he's actually hearing this, but he said there's up to at least 8 teams right now that are involved in bidding for Scott Laughton, and that first round picks are on the table. So again, this kind of goes back to legitimizing what the Flyers offer is. Again, you can either assume that the Flyers are sending out this message or that Drager's finding it on his own. I actually
Also, another interesting tweet that I just saw here
sure.
from Ken Campbell. So Ken's a really nice guy, a longtime writer of the Hockey News. I met him a couple times. He's awesome. He stated, if you ever needed any more evidence of how crazy the trade deadline is and how teams tend to lose their minds, there's currently a bidding war going on for Scott Laughton, and that was tweeted 3 hours ago at 3 o'clock. So I'm sure Ken has inside sources and knows what he's talking about. So it seems to me, based on Drager's tweet and Ken's tweet here, that there is some sort of bidding war probably happening for Laughton at this moment,
Yeah.
which, based on that tweet by Drager, makes sense, right?
Yeah, and if you look at the Tanner Jeannot trade from a few years back, while that's
Oh my
huge
God.
return. But like again, Scott Laughton does kind of fill that like, hey, this is a utility guy we can put all throughout our lineup, who can play physical, who is a leader, who can contribute. Again, he's having a pretty decent season. It's like he's still a
How
40-point
many
player in the league,
how many points does he have this season? Is he up
just under 30.
I think he's like 35 points or something, right?
No, no.
Close.
Who,
Okay.
Jeannot or
Or
Laughton?
Laughton, yeah.
Laughton's 27 and 60.
Okay, so he
So
might
he's
finish with
35.
almost like a 35-point season or something.
Yeah, yeah, which is pretty normal for him, 35 to 40 points.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, those guys are expensive at the trade deadline.
Typically,
This is the
and
time
you,
to trade him.
you have to just look at some of the moves already being made here, and that's kind of what we've always talked about. The trade deadline in terms of teams trying to acquire assets is really just an arms race, and teams don't want to get left behind, right? So like if you're a contender right now and you're trying to bolster your team and you just saw, okay, look at all these trades that have been happening, right? Like you saw let's see here. We saw Colorado acquire Ryan Lindgren, Jimmy Vesey. Minnesota gets Gustav Nyquist on March 1st. Edmonton gets Trent Frederick yesterday. Obviously, we see, Yanni Gord and Oliver Bjorkstrand already traded today back to Tampa from Seattle. Like, we're already seeing some of these depth guys that fit that Laughton mold kind of getting moved here. At the end of the day, there's only so many available players that can get moved or be traded or teams are willing to move, right? So if you're one of these contending teams and you're kind of desperate to add to the arms race and, oh no, like another team that's in contention added a bunch of players and you haven't yet, you might get desperate to make a move for a guy like Laughton and really overpay. And that's where I think the bidding war for the Flyers and, kind of holding out and using the leverage is going to be a real asset for Briere, especially going into Friday. Like I expect Laughton, at least with, this is looking like a seller's market at this point. I expect him to get moved. I think like it's been a rumor that's been swirling for years, but I think this is finally the year where it seems likeliest to happen just based on all the smoke. It seems like based on what Dreger was saying, that first round picks are in play. I do think, for a player of Laughton's ilk and you're the Flyers, if there's teams overpaying with the first round pick and even potentially, decent prospect, you have to execute a deal like that.
Yeah.
Just based on the value, right? Like you're maximizing the asset in Scott Laughton. I mean, he's a great locker room guy, really great utility player in the sense that you can plug him in on your top two lines in a pinch if you need him for a little bit, and he can, tread water. You can get him in there on the power play if you need to. You get him in there on the penalty kill. He'll fight. He's a great locker room guy. But first round pick and a potentially B type prospect, that's just the I think value you can't pass up on if you're the Flyers.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he can play center, while that's maybe he's
And
better on the
wing.
wing, but the fact that he can play center and that there is a premium on centers right now in the league, like there just doesn't seem to be enough centers all of a sudden, which
Yeah.
definitely becomes a big play when you talk about guys like Luchenko and the Flyers' upcoming draft and how centers are going to be a premium. That's my guess. It's like once again they're going to be like extremely premium, even more than defensemen, just because of where the league is right now and the lack that there aren't many centers with size. And Lawton's not like a huge guy, but he's between 6'1", 6'2". He's not
But
small,
he also will bring physicality. Like he's not afraid to
right?
mix it up on the board. He's not afraid to go to the net. He's not
And he's a
afraid to
two-way player.
Yeah,
He's
he's
a
not
penalty
afraid to make
killer.
that big hit.
Yeah,
There's so many check boxes that teams are looking for when they're trying to add these pieces, right? Like for the deadline.
yeah.
Lawton pretty much checks off every single box. So just based on the rumors that we've heard, right, from Darren Dreggers and even from Ken Campbell this afternoon, I would be pretty surprised. I think at this point, if Lawton does not get moved on Friday, obviously it's a wait and see. We know the Flyers love him. We know that Lawton would like to stay, but I just think if you're looking at maximizing your asset, I don't know if there's ever going to be a better chance here to get
Yeah.
a better return for Scott Lawton. I think this is kind of like, hey, this is where the asset is highest value.
Yes, I agree.
If you don't cash in, the asset will lose value, and you might never get that potential return
Yes.
again, right?
I
So
think this is the year, and considering how much he makes, it can fit him under the cap with
it's
everybody.
all
And
relative, yeah.
yeah, I think it's a wise move, and we're gonna go through the Flyers' remaining roster with Lawton included,
I'm wondering, Yariv,
going into next season.
I got a question for you. Like, obviously,
Sure.
we talk about Risto, we talk about Lawton. Is there anybody else on the roster that you think might get moved as a surprise, or anybody that comes to mind that you would, let's say they get traded? Like, do you have anybody you think that it could be?
I have guys like I would definitely try to trade Nick Sealer if he has value. Um, that like people are so hell bent on moving Risto, where I'm like
That's a good point.
Nick
Yeah.
Sealer makes half of what he makes. He's not going to get you the same return, but he can get you something. And if you really want to clear up cap space, which we're going to go through the Flyers roster, that is not top of their list as much, especially after the Frost Farabee trade.
They already
Um,
cleared considerable amount. Yeah.
Yes. That they're not like going to be jumping to remove anybody. Like I don't think they want interested in moving Bobby Brink. I think Forrester is as close to an untouchable outside of Michkov on this team. Noah Cates is definitely not going
He might be
anywhere.
pretty close to that too at this point.
Yeah, Noah Cates for sure is probably a Flyers lifer like Lawton. They already got rid of Frost and Farabee. That was pretty huge, and they did it ahead of time. Maybe a guy like Ryan Paling, but considering his age, no. Igor Zamula is not a guaranteed playoff performer for a team, so I
Yeah, I
don't
don't know
know.
if they would. Why would you spend assets on a guy that's never even made it into the NHL playoffs for a playoff run, right? It
Right,
just doesn't make a lot of sense unless they really love him.
right.
The only guy I could really see, like you said, to be honest, Sealer makes sense potentially if a team's real interested, depending on the return. I think obviously Eric Johnson, but that'll have to be his decision, and also a team will need to be interested
Here,
in that.
here's a random one which I don't think would happen. Um, Fedotov.
Fedotov's interesting. Maybe if there's like a team that's
Problem is his
desperate for a
cap hit.
Yeah, if there's a team that's desperate for a goalie, the thing is, if you're the Flyers, do you want to retain for a season to like help
No,
another team
that's
out?
the problem. You'd have
Yeah,
to. You would have to
yeah,
retain
you would have
50%.
to. And even if you did retain, like, what's the pick that you're getting? Like a sixth round,
Right, you're not
fifth
getting
rounder? Like
much.
that's what I mean. So I think for them and all the draft capital they have, a deal like that and the money to have to retain probably
Unlikely.
not worth it. The only guy I mean is probably Kuzmenko. Maybe he gets flipped.
Yeah,
Just because
yeah.
that's an easy asset to move realistically. There's no contract attached. If a team needs scoring help, let's say it's like 250 on trade deadline day, 10 minutes before the deadline. Team comes calling a Danny B. They're real desperate. Give me Kuzmenko for a third. Like maybe you listen.
Would you do it for a third though? I don't know if I would do it for a third. Maybe I
I
would
would
do it for a
probably
second.
I would do it for a second, but I just don't think a team's going to pay a second.
Right. That's the
And
problem.
to be
I
honest,
agree.
for a third round pick, like is that even going to hit? I mean, my perspective with Kuzmenko personally, I like the way he's played. I would resign him to a 1 year deal if you can, and have him play with
I'm
Michkov, and then
I'm not
trade
there
him,
yet.
at the trade deadline next year.
Yeah,
That's my thought.
I think that option is there. I'm not there yet. We're gonna literally coming up next. We'll go through the lineup, and Kuzmenko is not in it right now because he's not signed into next year, and he's a UFA. But like, I don't think it's out of the question or anything like that. But I think he there. This is a complete trial run. I haven't seen enough of him, Kuzmenko, to be like, I want him to be part of this next year. Having said that, he's got 5 points in 6 games. We know that he does this though.
Yeah.
We knew it was going to happen, that he was going to come in and play well offensively. But it could.
He's looked, you know what though, to your point, he's not been bad defensively either. Like there's been a couple plays where he's made some good back checks and stole pucks, and
Yeah.
he hasn't like missed coverages or anything in his own end.
That
So I wonder if,
well, that's why I don't think the. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's why I don't think the Flyers will move him. They're like, well, let's just give him the 20 games. Like a third round pick is not worth it for
that's what I
us.
mean. I think that's likely the plan, but plans can change, right? Like we
Sure.
said, if there's a desperate team and they need to add some sort of scoring punch, and all the contending teams around them outbid them for other players, and now they're between a rock and a hard place, and they're trying to make a push for the playoffs.
Yes.
And they're like, you know what? Fuck it. Like we need to make a run this year. Let's trade the second for Kuzmenko. I don't care.
Right.
Like,
That's
you
why I said
never
for a
know.
second I would do
You
it.
never know though if you can catch teams sleeping if they're desperate like that. So
Right.
it's
Right. So that's why I was
possible.
like, if it's a third, I'm like, nah, I'd rather just take a look at him because maybe he does fit. Maybe he does fit here. And if he does, that, maybe I'm moving somebody else in the off
Yeah.
season. Yeah, so it's going to get interesting. I guess the thought is like, would they even consider moving a guy like Cam York, who's an RFA?
It's interesting.
I don't think so. I think they really like Cam York. I think this is a down statistical year for him, but analytically, it's not at all. And I think they're probably banking on him to have a rebounding offensive season, just like they're expecting more out of Drysdale, who's a little younger too, right? I think
My only
those are the guys
thing,
they're going to hold on to.
yeah, my only thing with York, I expect them to re-sign him. I think the only reason why they wouldn't is, let's say he really is looking for a huge raise in terms
Right,
of
that's
what
the
he's
only
getting
thing. Like
paid.
maybe they move
Like,
him because of that.
let's say he's looking for 7 million a year or something. He's been playing on the top pair for the last 2 years, top pairing minutes. So they're gonna come in and say, "Hey, look at me. I'm only this. How old is York at this point? 23. Like he's still very
24.
young. Yeah, he's still very young for a defenseman. So
Maybe he's
they could
23.
try to make that
Insane.
case and potentially see, like, give him 7 million based on the minutes he's played. Like, and they're not wrong considering that they are using him in a
Yeah,
top pair
24.
role. He's
Yeah.
24. I mean, yeah, he got 30 points last season. He might get like 20 points. He did have an injury. He probably would have had around 30 points as well this season. So we'll see what happens. I think if they do trade him, an interesting thing to pursue would be who's another RFA that's having contract troubled with their team that's a center,
Right. Yeah.
and you
And
swap, right?
yeah, and then hope you can draft a defenseman, or whatever
Or
to
hope Emil Andre, can slide into that position for
sure.
next season or
Sure.
something.
I don't think there's a high likelihood. I think all three RFAs are getting re-signed.
Likely, yeah.
And I think they're just pushing the conversation to the offseason. So I really just, like you said, the Kuzmenko is probably the most realistic one. I personally would look to move Nick Seeler, even though I like him. I don't necessarily want to get rid of him. I think he's actually very good in a bottom pairing role.
Yeah.
I want to free up cap space and I want to give teams like a playoff bottom pairing defenseman. Like that's the guy that I would move. That, again, there was a ton of interest in him already. He does have term. But that's the guy where I'm like,
That's one possibility, I think.
if people are talking about trading Risto, I'd much rather lose Sealer than Risto. That's
I would
like my
say
whole point.
yeah, that's a great point. I would say as well, like another one to maybe throw out there that's random, but probably not as likely now just due to kind of what happened last week. It was Garnet Hathaway, just that your fourth line type of player, not a high cap hit, could fit it on any playoff
Sure.
team and contribute. But I mean, he just basically got concussed, so I doubt they're going to move him at this
Yeah,
point.
and with Hathaway, even though I completely agree with you, it's also kind of the same problem with Risto. Is that as soon as you trade him, you're going to look for a replacement for Hathaway for the fourth line because it's not Delorier, right?
No, definitely not.
Who I'm not going to lie, when Hathaway was given that cheap shot by Imama or whatever the heck his name is, my immediate thought was like, man, where's Delorier when you need him? Like that was like immediately I was like, that's why you have Delorier because
Yeah, exactly.
like nobody fought Nobody did anything, but it's like, but you're gonna
You
pay for
needed
it if
to.
Delorier's
Yeah.
out there. That's why I expect Delorier to be in the lineup for the entirety of, because I think they thought that too. When because Hathaway is like kind of our guy for that, even though he's not a goon. He's
He'll
definitely
fight
more
though.
of a grinder, right? But he won't, even if he doesn't fight you, he's gonna throw that big body check in response, right? And it's like, you
You need
know,
somebody to respond in a situation
and
like
there's
that
really
where the
only,
player's getting headhunted.
yeah,
So
and the Flyers really only have two other guys. I guess you could include
Sealer,
Law.
Laughton, and Hathaway are basically your tough guys aside from
Risto
Delorier.
is not a tough guy, but he's
He
physically
will fight,
intimidating.
but he
But
won't
he's
do it
physically
often.
intimidating. He's the guy who would level somebody, right, in a response. He's the guy who would
Yeah, yeah.
throw that big hit. So, and they don't really have a lot of those guys in the lineup, though there is Devin Kaplan, and we're going to go through that in a second, who I'm not sure if he's going to get signed, but, that's a guy that kind of fits the Hathaway
That
mold.
tenacious role. Yeah, yeah.
Right, exactly. You can see why the Flyers picked him. So let's get into it. We're gonna do the screen share. So I did this independently without Vasili, but he did see what I put together. We're gonna go through. We're gonna share Puckpedia, and we're just gonna go through what we suspect maybe the at least it's not even a suspect of the roster. It's kind of like, okay, this is what we have. The guesses are really with the signings, like the values of the signings. Like I really don't know what teams are gonna do, but this is set on next year with next year's salary cap. So we're going to take a look at that. First thing foremost, what you're going to see is 14 million of projected cap space. So for everybody who's talking about like, you got to remove Risto, we need the cap space, you got to remove all these people, and this is without trading Laughton. So you figure if you get rid of Laughton too,
Another 3 million. Yeah.
there's another $3 million available to you right there. So the Flyers will have plenty of cap space to make a big move that is what their decision is next year. The following year is even an insane number, right? It's something we have never seen in the modern era for the Flyers, is like a stupid amount of cap space. So there is no desperation to get rid of Risto. There's no desperation to get rid of Laughton. That is not real. Flyers are not desperate for money. And with the cap projected cap space you're looking at is with me already re-signing the players who are RFAs and UFAs, and I probably signed too many guys for what the Flyers want to do, and that's minus the ability to trade guys in the offseason. So plenty of flexibility for a year where the Flyers are not going in it to win it, right? So just first and foremost, right? Let's get that out of the way. So because remember, the cap is going up not just next year, the following year, and the following year after that.
There's a
So
bunch
there's
of projections that it might get up to 113 million, like 3, 4 seasons from now. So
right.
they're in a good spot in terms of where the cap's going and potentially adding money, adding contracts.
100%. So again, this is the Flyers roster only based off of the RFAs being re-signed and the players that they already have locked up, right? So Scott Laughton included, Ristolainen included, and again, this is, I don't think will be the roster going into next year.
Yeah, there'll be changes for sure, right?
Right. The only assumption I made is Jet Luchenko will be on the team, and even that might not be true. But this is kind of what I went into it. And you can see, and this is why I believe it's the right time to move Scott Laughton. And, you were talking about Kuzmenko. I don't think that if you look at the Flyers roster, their biggest need is Scott Laughton on the left wing, right?
Yeah, agreed. You would
And
want a guy with more talent like a Kuzmenko, especially to potentially spice the power play up a little bit. Maybe, right? It all depends on kind of how he's going to perform the
yes,
remainder of the season here, and if he can continue the pace, right? If he's around a point a game, I mean, I can't see why the Flyers wouldn't try to sign him to a short-term deal if that's something he's willing to accept. I think if he's not willing to accept something short-term, though, that's where you probably see Philadelphia move on. I mean, just based on what we built here, Yariv, like this is pretty accurate, right? Like I said earlier, I think Laughton will be moved, so you could probably get him and remove him, and that's opening up a space to potentially make a signing. I think, the clear thing that this roster needs, you look at that center depth. I mean, Noah Cate's really great third line center. I think Sean Couturier at this point in his career, I don't know if he's that 1C that you need, right? So obviously the Flyers' goal here for this roster is probably to add some sort of middle six center, especially after you remove Frost. And
Yes.
if you're going to remove Laughton, adding some center is going to make a lot of sense as well. And even if you look at this team's wing depth, I don't know if they're necessarily going to, make trades from the wing to add to center. But if you just look at their prospects, which we're going to go into after in terms of like the Phantoms roster, they have so many wing prospects, right? And think of all the draft capital they have. Are they going to potentially parlay that, to make a trade for center? Who knows? Who's to say? But you would typically see a deal like that around, a draft, maybe beginning of free agency. And I just think with the cap space that they have and the, potential that Laughton will be gone, I could imagine they're trying to make some sort of a swing, right? Like Elliot Friedman mentioned in his 32 Thoughts podcast from last week that I listened to, he essentially said that he's hearing rumbling that the Flyers are looking to make a big swing, right? Like, and I think just based on all the moves the Flyers have made, like subtracting a lot a Frost earlier, subtracting a Farabee, potentially moving on from Laughton, all the cap space that they're going to have upcoming here this offseason and the offseason afterwards, plus all the draft capital, I just think it's kind of leaning into the fact they're looking to make some sort of a big trade somewhere on this roster. We've reiterated it a bunch of times, right? Yariv, like both of us don't really see this status quo roster that we kind of have built
Right.
initially here returning for next season.
Right.
What's your thoughts so far?
No, that's exactly it, right? Like, sure, you can be like, okay, I can put a roster together with what we currently have, but I don't think the Flyers plan on coming back with next year's roster. And while, Cates, Paling, Couturier, and Luchenko is not like a scary lineup down the middle. That is the hole you want to fit. And maybe you don't even want to put Luchenko in the NHL. Maybe we're being overzealous. Maybe they actually want him to spend another year at juniors, and then he'll come back to the NHL. I don't know, right? Because I'm very interested to see how he evolves, especially going into next season. So we're gonna be able to, we're not really gonna know that right now. But I think for sure, and I'm going to pull up the UFAs too. And this is all really important. The reason I'm showing you guys this and that we're showing this to you is that I want you, when you guys are talking about removing players and trading and doing all this stuff, you need to know what's actually out there and what the actual options are because they're pretty limited, right? So that's why I don't think the Flyers are going to go balls to the walls in UFA market. I don't think anybody really thinks that. But they can free up their roster to, again, maybe get even a little younger for one more year. And this is what Vasili and I were talking about. Unless they can make a play for one of these big name guys where you're like, this is a can't miss type of player.
Yeah, I have to make this trade, exactly.
Yeah, and if they even make it to UFA, and if they even make it to the point where the team can't re-sign them, right? So there's a lot that even comes into play there. But I do agree with Vasili, right? This is going to be... They're going to be looking to make a move. I think they are working on a big swing, and that big swing is not happening at the trade deadline, right? Realistically, It's possible. It's possible. But realistically, it's probably not. It's probably coming off season. But yes, that top 6 spot, that's exactly what I see. That's why I'm like, all right, it's time we can move on from Scott Laughton.
Well, yeah,
I look at the roster, and he's the guy I can remove from top to bottom. He's the one guy where I'm comfortable removing him from the lineup. And we have replacements.
No, I agree, right? Like just looking at this roster, it's overcrowded in the sense like, okay, you remove Laughton, right? Even if you remove Laughton, technically Delorier, I mean, he's going to be a UFA obviously, but or is he a UFA next season or this offseason? I can't remember.
I think it's next year.
It's next year. Okay, so he's still going to be on. Yeah, he's still on the roster for next season technically. Okay,
so this is the 404 that you see in that image. That's next year's assumption.
Perfect. So that's what I mean, right? Like even if you remove Laughton, you still have an extra 4 that's not even playing technically, right? So like it is overcrowded, this roster in a sense, and that's why I kind of
could also waive him.
Yeah, that's why I just think that there's gonna be some removals here because firstly, okay, you got to get Luchenko in there. I mean, a guy like Alex Bump, we see that the Flyers constantly touting him, saying that he's an NHL player. Who knows if he's gonna make the NHL team? But there needs to be room for a guy like him. There's other prospects that they've drafted as well, right? Like a Barkey. I don't know if he's going to be ready or anything, but if he comes and impresses, or if there's guys in the AHL they might want to call up to maybe give a shot, like there needs to be space to have to be able to graduate some of these prospects that you're developing here, which they really don't have right now. Even if you remove Laughton, the space is tough to find. So
yes,
that's what kind of it looks like to me, right? Like there has to be some sort of odd certain odd men out here. And I would imagine, if they do end up making that big swing and kind of remove some prospects, that might actually be a good thing for their prospect tool, because I just think at this point they've made so many draft picks over the last three seasons. Like, where is the room for these guys to play at the AHL or the NHL level? Like, you have to either start making room for these guys, or you're gonna have to trade them. So
Yes. No, 100%. So, and again, I'm just going to go through the numbers that I re-signed the guys to. Again, these are just assumptions. I gave Tyson Forrester a 2-year deal at 1.8 million, complete guess. A little bit more than Bobby Brink, but I'm kind of going off of the Bobby Brink contract. I gave Noah Cates a 3.5 at 4 years. I think he might even get longer than 4 years. He might get 5. Like, they might just be like, we just want you here. Like, we're good.
honestly, if I was them, like, sign him to
I'm
7,
sick.
8 years and give him like 4.5 million to do it. That'll end up being a steal, probably.
Yeah, no, I'm not that much against that. I think you just need to hold on to Noah Cates forever. I love Noah Cates. I've
I
already
think he's the
even when he was
perfect,
struggling, I
yeah.
still
Well,
loved him.
he's the perfect 3C I would imagine, right? So
Yes, yeah. So he's there. Ryan Paling is another guy the Flyers could consider moving. I don't think they will, but I think they like him as the fourth line C. He's
and they
another
like his
option.
speed, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jacob Peltier, I gave like pretty much the bare minimum, a contract they could bury, but a 2-year deal at 1.1 million. Again, he
That's
could
pretty
get
fair based on his production. So
right. That's kind of what I was going off of, and the fact that he hasn't done too much at the NHL level. He might get a little bit more than that, but I don't think so. It could also be a shorter term deal for him, just like bridge him completely to a 1-year deal. I think he's still an RFA after this, and then I re-signed Cam York as well at 5.5 million over 2 years, just a bridge deal.
I could see something like that where he bets on himself and says, "Give me this deal," and then the
Right.
next deal is kind of where to cash in and get that like
That
$8 million deal or
yes,
something, right?
and I've heard Bill Meltzer say this as well, and Jason Martinez, and I completely agree with them. Like, because of the down statistical year, like, you don't want to lock him up long term. You want him to kind of continue to improve and not get
Or give
comfortable
him that chance
and
too,
not
right?
right and not also not fully commit to him too,
Yeah,
right? In case you
but
need to move him.
you can spin it another way for the team. If I'm the Flyers, I'm saying, hey, like, we want to give you this bridge so you can really prove your worth to us and prove that you're that, top pairing defenseman that we think you are. So we're going to bridge you for this 5.5 million. And then when you really perform, we'll give you the raise that you deserve. That's the way that I would phrase it. I would say, hey, we believe in you. Show us what you can do in these 2 years. I think that's
Yeah.
the best way to pump a guy's tires. So
Yeah, but everybody here gets a raise. That's the
yeah,
thing
of
that walked
course.
away
Yeah.
with. And obviously the following year, Fedotov he's probably not gonna get re-signed, right? So he's probably gonna walk. So you get more money after next year anyway. All these are very tenable contracts for the Flyers in the short term. So this is kind of where they would be. And again, if you were removing Scott Laughton, that's another $3 million you have to make a bigger move. And I'm gonna pull up the UFA list after we go through the AHL guys for next year, and we'll take a look at the names that are available out there just based off of UFA status right now. And again, that's just UFAs, where we can look at RFAs too. Maybe we'll do that also, but that I don't think the Flyers are going to be offer sheeting anybody. I think they'll be trading for an RFA if they can get an RFA, because of where they are in the standings. You don't want to risk your own picks. You want
Yeah,
to try to
exactly.
make a deal and get that player out of there without having to risk, because the Flyers could still be a bottom 10 team next year. We don't know that. And you don't want to lose a top 10 pick for an RFA. You want to put together a deal. Maybe it's even a roster player, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to get locked into that with the RFA situation and an offer sheet. Firstly, you're losing picks, and then also based on the compensation you're giving, you might have
You
to
have to
pay them.
overpay.
You might have to
Yeah.
overpay them salary wise. So if you're gonna lose assets anyway, you might as well use draft capital you have in the trade, and then you can negotiate the deal with the player and the agent versus getting locked into a forced number, right? So
Right. Now they could maybe get an RFA that's very under the radar and
yeah, exactly.
maybe
Might it be like a
is
top
underneath
tier
that.
type.
Yeah, it's like underneath that first round pick tier, right? That might be an option that they go with the offer sheet. I still don't really believe that offer sheets are going to be aplenty. I do think St. Louis kind of opened people's eyes because they did the successful ones this year.
It's just so rare, and
It's exactly,
I
it's
just think
risky.
these NHL GMs, I don't think it's a tool many are willing to use. So other GMs don't want to use it on their counterparts. So I just think it's kind of like a written rule. Most teams don't use it. It would make it more exciting in terms of trades and signings, but just like most teams don't seem interested in using their picks and money in that way of making offer
Yeah,
sheets.
but it could happen. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. It just I don't think it's the
It's not
highest
likely.
likelihood. So let me go down. So this is non NHL guys. I did re-sign Ule Lixell to a 1 year deal, 1 million. I assume they're going to want him back. I don't
Yeah,
know if he's going to be
man.
one come back, but
Sorry, Reeve. Just looking at what you have, like I didn't even fail to mention, like you'd imagine too, like the Flyers are gonna want to get Andre in there, right? Like,
yes, I didn't put him on the NHL roster for a reason, just because we don't know. But there's a good chance that that's where you look at a guy like Zamula. Maybe they consider moving on from him.
exactly. Yeah.
Maybe they just keep him anyway, and they just go, okay, well then Z will be the
He's the
7.
seventh.
If
Yeah,
he loses
potentially.
his spot, then he's the 7, right? And that's not the end of the world for them because he's still relatively young, right? He's going to be 24, going on 25.
Yeah, it's true.
It's not like the end of the world or end of the road for Z if that's what happens. Um, so again, Ula Excel got a contract. Um, Again, the Richard is still locked up. Tuamala is still going to be here. Gauthier just got his new contract. Rizzo is still a prospect. Gendron is still a prospect. Alex Bump, I have him starting in the AHL. We
Makes
don't even know
sense.
for
Yeah.
sure if he's signing, but Brent Flair kind of hinted at that he's not going to finish his college career. At least they're trying to convince him to. So I give him a 2 year deal at 1.1 million. 2 years because he's like an older college player.
Yeah.
So that's my guess. And then same thing with Devin Kaplan. I gave him just a 3 year deal, standard 800,000. It could end up being more than that. It could be less. I don't know, and I don't even know if he's coming this year. But I think he is a guy that the Flyers like see as a Hathaway potential replacement. So I think they probably will. Maybe he's not even playing third line, right? Maybe that's Zayd Wisdom, who's having a pretty good season right now. I do have them re-signing Elliot Denoyer. I don't really know, you know.
It's
And J-
possible. I think it depends with Denoye just based on like where their other prospects are at, like their younger prospects in other leagues that potentially can graduate to the AHL level. Like if they think there's a center that can take his spot and they don't believe in Denoye
he's not
bouncing
even playing
back.
center right now. He's playing wing.
That's what I mean, right? So maybe they think there's another center they would rather use the space on. We'll have to see, but
Well, they always seem to add veterans too, so I would not even assume that this would be their roster,
oh yeah,
right?
definitely, definitely.
Denver Barkey's obviously the X factor here. Tuamala is an X factor, and Bump are X factors as far as like potential graduates during the season. We don't know that. We don't know
Yeah,
what camp will
that's
be
a good
like.
thing
Barkey
to
could make the
add
team for all we know.
for sure. I mean, even like I don't want to say that Gaucher is a real lock or anything, but they re-signed him. They gave him a call up. Who knows? They do like his size, so maybe as like a fourth line center option. It's possible
It's
if they,
possible. I
but probably not likely.
Yeah, I think realistically they just like they love him as an AHL guy and wanted to
Yeah,
reward
exactly.
him earlier.
Well, think about the
Um,
hard work going for the ECHL all the way to the
right.
AHL, right? So I
He's like
totally agree.
what's that dude we had years ago that we built up through the system?
Hayden Hodgson did that.
No, yeah,
That
Hodgson is one, but the one that was better. Oh my God, I'm
it's
forgetting
escaping
his
me
name.
now.
He's a winger. I forgot. I've already forget his name.
Is
Sorry,
it
dude.
Mayhew? No.
No, it's not Jerry Mayhew.
Well, he
It was
was.
after Mayhew.
That was after Mayhew. Oh man, that sucks.
He came up through the ECHL, redheaded dude. I'm forgetting his name.
Oh,
I could
too
probably
bad.
I could probably figure it out. Hold on one second. Now I want to see what
Now
it's
I
probably.
want to know. It's not Harry Zolnarchuk,
No.
but he's also like a
Um,
famous, fourth liner for the Flyers.
Willman,
Oh,
Max
there we go,
Willman,
Max Wellman. Yeah.
Max Willman.
I don't know why that escaped me. He was the classic like Fletcher era call up, right?
Yes, exactly. So he could be like the new Willman type of guy. Only he plays center
Something
and he's
like
got
that.
size. So, um,
I wonder because they had Abels to a 1 year deal. Do you think they were signing Abels at
it's
all?
possible. I
They
think they
liked his
like him.
size, right?
I think that's what I mean. Like, I don't know if they could re-sign Eklund too, who's in his mid 20s, who I also think they like. But again, if these guys are graduating and coming in, you got to let some dudes go.
That's true,
So,
right? That's
so
kind
I
of the
don't
point we
know.
made with the Flyers as well. That like
Right.
they just have so many prospects, and they're only going to continue to draft more with all the draft capital they have. So you kind of have to be able to filter
Right.
some of these guys you're drafting into your system somehow. So
Right. And then the D, Andre I have here, I don't know. Playing with Gronz. I also re-signed Gronz for 2 years at
I
1.1
assume they will
million.
resign him. I think they like what they've seen from him so
Yeah.
far, especially with the call up that he had this season. He looked pretty good. Like
Yeah.
I would imagine a goal for them. At least it seems like it for me. But like the way they've played Andre and Gronz together, I feel like a goal is to have this be a pair at the NHL level potentially. If Gronz can get his game to that level where they think he's an NHL defenseman,
Right.
I don't know, but I mean I feel like that's what they're aiming for, just playing them together all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I again, that's why I re-signed Gronz. I think they like him. I gave him 1.1 million. It's probably too high,
He's got some size
but
though, so
but that is the variable amount, 1.1 million. So that's why I
yeah.
went with that number. And then Hunter McDonald obviously will still be here. I assume Louis Belpedio is going to get re-signed. I
They
don't
like him as a
know.
veteran, yeah.
But we know Bonk is going to be with the team, so obviously Bonk is in there. Ethan Sanson, I don't think is going anywhere right now. I think he'll actually get re-signed at the end of his contract. I think he's doing a good job, but we'll see how he plays next year. That's kind of up to him.
Yeah.
But he's progressing very nicely. And then Adam Yinning's got 1 year left on his deal. Maybe he doesn't even finish it, but I suspect he'll want to.
He may go back to Sweden. Yeah.
Well, but it's a one-way deal, so he's going to get actually paid more
Oh, fair. Yeah, I forgot
next
about
year.
that. The Flyers structured it that way, right?
Right.
They were kind of
So
hoping
he
that he
didn't
kind of
leave,
grew in.
probably.
Yeah, well, they were hoping he grew into like a 7 or a 6 role at the NHL level, which hasn't happened this season. He's kind of underwhelmed, but at least from his perspective, stick around, get paid, an NHL wage. That's a pretty good deal. So
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, looking at this roster, they will have to sign additional players beyond
yeah,
even what I assumed. They will not be going just with the perfect amount of players. We see the AHL team is full of guys right now. And then obviously Carson Bjarnason will most likely be playing in the minors next year. I'm assuming he'll be the backup probably. And I'm assuming that Kolosov is willing to play in the minors next year. I don't
guess we'll
know.
see. It's going to be an interesting one because isn't Kolosov the third goalie right now with the Flyers, which is strange to me. I just don't really get it
Right.
at
That's
all.
why it's like, I don't know, but they'll need another, like Cal Peterson's moving on. That's a big chunk of cap
E2
they're getting there.
Makanyemi, was that a 1 year deal?
It's a
Or
one
did
year
they
deal.
okay.
It's a 1 year deal, and he was injured 90% of the
So
season
they
so far.
probably won't resign him.
Right.
I would
So,
imagine.
which was his problem before
The thing
that.
with Kolosov that puzzles me is like the Phantoms are in the middle of essentially, a race to the playoffs here. They're in the mix. Like, wouldn't you want him to play games with the Phantoms right now? And they have all these injuries. I just don't
Cal Peterson
understand.
just came back. I will say that.
I do know that, but he's not like he's any good. So
Right.
like you might as well like I don't understand the benefit of Kolosov being the third man here, like other than getting paid an NHL wage. Like
I didn't, dude.
like you're
You're,
practicing with the NHL team, like shouldn't you want to get a prospect of his nature the most reps he possibly can
yes,
in a
it is a
starting role
concern.
playing in meaningful games? I just think there must be an attitude issue with this guy at this point. If like why can't
Well,
you set up
that
minors?
was the rumor, right? That he would threaten to go to Russia or Belarus if
And I guess that's still what's happening because they haven't set him down yet. So
yeah. So I don't know, but yes, he should be playing games, and that does leave a question mark with next year. Like maybe they're going to roll 3 goalies next year too.
I mean,
I don't know.
my thought process is I don't want a goalie on my team that's going to be strong arming me into keeping him at the NHL level and not even play games. Like you're a prospect, you're not even 25, you should go to the AHL and play.
Yes.
It's best for your development. Like even him as a player, like it's not like he can say I'm the best goalie right now and I'm playing at my best or anything. Like he's had some stinkers this year. There's a lot for him to work on potentially to his game. I think he has a ton of talent. I just don't understand it. Like if I was a goalie personally and wanting to kind of prove myself and show that I can be a long-term starter, I'd want to go to the AHL and show the team, hey, I can do this at this level and show you that when you do call me up next time, I'll be ready for the NHL level.
Yeah.
So it's really strange. It's just really strange.
Well,
And
it
if
is.
I'm the sorry,
It
go
is
ahead.
what it is. No, I'm sorry, but I think it is what you're saying. It is.
If I'm the Flyers, I would look to move him in a deal.
They might.
I would try to move him in some sort of deal, maximize the asset, and then Fedotov seems to be a really team friendly guy, just his attitude and the way that kind of he responds to the situations. Because like think about the last two times he's gone into game action, essentially, like aside from, Urson getting pulled, it was what, like 20 to 30 days off both times. He didn't seem to make a peep or like complain or
Well,
anything.
in
So
in fairness, we haven't heard Kolosov complain either.
no, we
At
haven't.
all.
We haven't.
At all. He's not complaining, but maybe he just doesn't want to be in the AHL. We don't know exactly. It is weird.
It's strange.
But
It is
I
pretty
don't.
strange.
I actually think that what you're saying about potentially trading him is not that bad of an idea. Because I think there are teams that would be interested in trading for him as an off-season deal, not like a
Yeah.
trade deadline.
No, of course,
deal.
but I just mean like he's shown, great performance in the KHL. He seems like a guy that should have the ability to be an NHL goalie at this point. Like I think he has the skill to do it. He obviously needs to get the reps in to get more comfortable at the NHL level. I just think that if you're the Flyers, like you're looking for that big swing or that, trade that you're trying to kind of bolster your team for next season, add him in as a throw-in, put it over the top. Like I would just get rid of him. If personally, I wouldn't want a guy on my team that, tries to force his way onto an NHL
Well,
roster and he hasn't proven
they're
anything yet.
they're usually wrong. Rutger McGroarty.
Yeah,
There's an
right.
example. Here's another one that Flyers fans wanted. David Juracek. Where do you think David Juracek is playing? I looked this up today.
Where is he playing in the AHL?
He was traded to Minnesota. Is he playing in the NHL? No.
No, yeah,
26
exactly.
games for Iowa. He only had 6 points, 6 assists. He did play 6 games for
Well,
Minnesota.
I just think an
1 goal, 1 assist.
it's hard to correct an attitude issue, especially, with guys like at this age. Like it's not like Kolosov's super, super young or anything. Like he's 23, 24. Like, I mean, that's not the greatest sign, but anyways, we'll have to see what happens with
Well,
him.
I mean, you're Askarov, right? There's another
Same
example.
deal.
He's
Yeah.
played in the NHL, doesn't have good numbers. They're actually very similar to Kolosov's numbers at the NHL level. For San Jose, 13 games played, 3.1 goals against average, and a .896 save percentage. I mean, he's on a bad team, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there with the numbers. But
Yeah.
he's played 19 games in the AHL this year, so like not a big change from what Nashville was doing, right? So it's like Kolosov, you're just not ready, dog. Like you're just not ready to be an NHL goalie quite yet. You
Well, he
need
just
to
needs more
tear up the
reps. Yeah.
AHL. Yeah.
At the AHL level. Agreed.
So and you saw those guys were traded. So that's why when you said that, I was like, maybe you're right.
I could see it, yeah. Just
Yeah.
because it's just such a strange situation. Like I would imagine the management staff isn't a fan of what he's doing at this point for
Yeah.
them. So
And I'll say this overall, just looking at the Flyers roster going into next year, the Flyers better be drafting centers because they
they
are.
have no center depth. Yeah.
It's not only that, yes, that is a huge problem, right? Like I'm assuming Barkey's going to play center, and I think they will start him off as a center, but we'll see because he's been playing wing. But the thing is, they're a premium as well. So if you draft a bunch of centers and half of them work out,
You could flip some, yeah.
they're worth value. So I think they need to go center heavy, assuming those guys are the guys available. So let's look at the UFA market. So these are just top point producers from this year, NHL only. So obviously the big name Mitch Marner is out there. Let's be honest, I don't think he makes it to UFA.
Leafs probably resign. Yeah.
Yeah, they either re-sign him or they swap him for Mikko Rantanen.
Something like that, like a Natchez Ranton swap. It would make sense, right? Like if you're going to trade a player of that value, you're going to have to get a really, really good player back as
but
well.
it's
So.
his best season this year. Like, why would you not re-sign Mitch Marner?
Yeah. Also, too, if I'm the Leafs, like just seeing kind of how he performed at the Four Nations when all the chips were down in critical games, like that would give me confidence that, hey, like if he could do it on that stage, like why can't he do it for us this season in the playoffs?
And
right?
they're probably waiting on the playoffs, right? But then
Of course.
you can do that to Austin Matthews too. Like you're gonna rip Austin Matthews. Funny how they only rip Mitch Marner. I think it's just Toronto media freak out. So
Hey,
I don't.
I mean, as somebody who lives in Toronto, Marner and Matthews are both catching the blame.
Yeah,
Marner worse, but it's
but
just
nobody is
crazy.
talking about getting rid of Matthews. They're only
Oh,
talking
no,
about
no,
getting rid
no.
of Marner.
Definitely not. I mean, Marchand's a real interesting UFA that I see there.
Yeah, I think he's too old for
No,
us
no, not for the
to take.
Flyers, not for the Flyers, but just like in general as a UFA, like I wonder what team is going to sign him because I don't think he's going to go back to Boston.
I think he will. I think he's going to finish in Boston.
I
Just
mean,
because
he's the captain and
the
all. I just think,
Cups.
yeah, the Cups. He's the captain too. I just think that like I wouldn't be surprised to see him go somewhere else and chase a couple more
Yeah,
cups.
he's old and they need to retool. So like, it's not that crazy. Nikolai Ehlers, I don't think will make it to UFA, but if he does, like, too bad he's not a center because
We'll see though, because it's weird. Like Winnipeg won't play him more than like a second line role for years at this point.
right.
And he might just be a second line player, and that's kind of why. But it's like he puts up so many points in that second line role. Like look at his points right now, 52 points, 53 games,
Yeah.
and his ice time is like 15 minutes a night. Like why don't
Yeah.
you play him as a first liner and let him score 90 points for you a
Yeah.
season? Like
He,
I don't know, really weird. Really
he's
weird
probably
player.
going to look for 8 million plus in free agency.
And you'll probably get that.
Matt Duchene is a guy where I'm like, I look at Duchene or Tavares and I'm like, man, I would love to give one of those guys a short-term
2 year
deal,
deal. Yeah.
just to be here with us. I don't think that that'll happen, but like these are like, especially Duchene because he's speedier and like Tavares is like slower and we already
And
have
Duchesne will be
Couturier.
less money too, probably.
Potentially, yeah. Even though he's being severely underpaid for the past few seasons, so like I think he can get like a Giroux like deal, finish out his career, probably get a 3 year deal. That's why I don't think the Flyers will be involved. Same with Tavares. I think he's also can get like a 3 year deal, probably
Probably.
somewhere around 4.5 to
How
six
funny
million
would it be
dollars.
if he went back to the Islanders?
It would be funny. I think realistically, like
He
both of
won't,
these
but that'd be
guys,
hilarious.
well, both of these guys should be moving to cup contenders to try to win a cup
Yeah.
before it's over. And Duchesne has a cup? No,
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 he
he doesn't.
doesn't, but
No.
he might win one with Dallas this
Yeah,
season.
they're
Who
so
knows?
good, dude. Their roster is so good. I was looking at it yesterday. I'm like, they are so deep. They're just a
Hey, if you're
deep
gonna,
team.
speaking of offer sheets, if the Flyers are gonna offer sheet any center, Wyatt Johnson is
Well,
the guy
yeah,
to go for.
he's not.
I'm
He's not.
sure
He's
he's
not even gonna
not.
make it that
No,
far, in my
he
opinion.
won't make it. But if you're gonna spend all those picks and that money, then that's a guy I think it's worth it.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I think there are a handful of guys. We'll look at RFAs after this. We can take a look at that too. So, Ryan Donato having a great season playing with Bedard, but I don't think he fits the bill as what the Flyers are looking
I feel
for.
like Chicago probably just resigns him. I could see it.
Maybe he might also be moved at.
Yeah, he might get
You could
traded at the
probably get them
deadline.
a first round pick. So, but I
I
think
think,
his age is right. 28.
yeah, I mean, Brock Nelson's a center, but his age, once again, I'm pretty sure the Islanders will move him, but Lamoriello is weird, so we will see. They
Yeah.
should move him
Move
based on his
him and then
age and where they
bring
are.
in Tavares next year.
Yeah, that's a classic Lamoriello type
Yeah.
move.
Kyle Palmieri, I think, will probably move.
Yeah,
He
agreed.
used to play center. Claude Giroux, I think, will probably retire in Ottawa. I think
Yeah,
he's going to re-sign there.
it seems likely at this point, and they kind of seem like they're
I'd
turning
lo-
the corner. Well, they just seem like they're turning the corner, like they're going to make the playoffs this season for the
yeah,
first time in a long time. So
yeah.
I
It'd
would
be hilarious
imagine
if he finished his career here
it
in
would
the
be
end.
really, really funny.
It'd
Yeah,
be awesome.
I would love to see it. It'd kind of be almost like a Gagne, right, where they
Yeah,
traded him to Tampa, then brought him back, and then he finished as a Flyer essentially.
yeah. Give him a 1 year deal to like retire as a Flyer or whatever. Because he's going to
Yeah.
be 37.
Hey, to be honest, I mean, you bring Giroux back in like 1 or 2 years on a 1 year deal, like on the third line or something. He's probably a
Yeah,
great third liner.
yeah. Sam Bennett is really interesting if he doesn't get re-signed, but I don't see the Flyers like jumping on a Sam Bennett. Though I think they would really like him. I just think there's going to be a team out there that like
That
sees
might
him as a
overpay. Yeah,
just our center position. It's not the exact type of center we're looking for.
high skill
Um,
center is what you want,
right. That's what
essentially.
we need. Right. We don't necessarily need like a thumper down the middle.
No.
Even though Bennett's one of the best. Jacob Chikrin, I think, is going to get re-signed by Washington. I think it's just working out way too well there.
And yeah, I mean, after the season they've been having, I think keeping their roster together as much as possible is
Go
probably
for
what
it
they'll be
again.
looking to do,
Because they're
right?
a young roster. They're not old.
It's
Like,
really just Ovechkin and like John Carlson and Oshie that are like the veterans on that
right.
team
Oshie's
now.
like been on LTIR for like 2 years already.
Yeah.
Jamie Benn will probably, I assume, will stay in Dallas and will take considerably less. I
If
don't
they
know.
win, I mean, I assume he might retire potentially.
True. I mean, I wouldn't mind bringing in Jamie Benn for a year. Can he still play
Yeah,
center?
I don't know.
Neil Pionk, I think, will get
See,
re-signed.
Brock Besser's interesting, but he's a winger. So, like, do you need to add another winger? Probably not.
I'm like not even looking at wingers. That's why it's
Oh, that's
like
the thing,
that's why
right?
even Kuzmenko doesn't interest me that much because I'm
Well, this
like,
team just need it's just so glaringly obvious that the Flyers need a center base. Like they have too many wingers. So like unless you're trading away 3, 4 of your wingers, it doesn't really make sense to add
right,
one.
right. Dodonov doesn't work. Aaron Ekblad, I don't think will
Can
make
you
it to
just search
UFA.
centers, Yuri? Like what's just the center list?
Centers. So we looked at some of them already. Jack
Yeah.
Roslovic is an interesting one,
That
but
is
again,
kind of
doesn't
interesting.
fit the bill for what we need. Same with Pius Suter.
Really, none of these guys now. It's more just bottom of the lineup guys at this point. Once you
Right.
get past Giroux, it's basically just all like third, fourth
Right.
liner
Gustav
types.
Nyquist is like, okay, he could be a plug-in guy maybe for a year for
But he doesn't
us.
even play center anymore. Like
Right.
that's kind of inaccurate.
Exactly.
He's been to be honest, this guy's Nyquist has been a winger for like the last like 10 seasons. So like he played center like one season for Detroit in his rookie year with Datsuk and Zetterberg.
Right. There's really not much out there. That's why it's like that's why I looked
Trade
at
market is
Duchesne.
where well yeah, but I just think for the Flyers and what they're trying to do with the center, like they're probably trying to add a center that's a little bit younger in that like ideally 23 to 28 range. So that's something you're going to find in the trade market. And
Yeah.
for being
I
honest, they have a ton of assets to weaponize to make that type of trade. With all the draft capital and prospects, I have no doubts that they can make a trade if they want to do it. It'll just be, is it the right time and is it the right player for them? And are they going to actually pony up and target that guy this
right.
offseason?
I think they really only go for guys who are willing. Like even Jonathan Drouin interests me as like a playmaker here. But I'm like, but I would only give
On
him a
the wing.
short-term deal, and he's 29. He doesn't want a short-term deal.
And he can't play center. So that's
Right.
also a
Ivan
problem.
Provorov, if he makes it to UFA, is going to be one of the most prized UFAs there are. I know people don't want to
For
think
D
that,
man, definitely.
but
I
from
think
what I understand, he's going to stay in Columbus, and that his brother's like going to school in Ohio or something
you
like
know
that.
what though? I mean, if you're looking at Columbus, they're in a playoff spot. So like, are they really going to look to be trading one of their top
No,
four D men in a
no,
playoff spot?
and
Is
they
that
have
like a
plenty of cap space, so I don't see that either. You know, like there's really not much here that
let's
is
switch to
that tempting.
RFAs and see
Yeah.
what's happening.
So the RFA obviously is considerably more interesting.
Do
And we
should we do NHL only as well?
yes, thank you. So yeah, Wyatt Johnson you already brought up. I mean, he would be the most
That's
ideal. I'm
I
hearing 8
yeah.
million a year for him. I would give him 8 million a year also.
I would personally I would just make a ridiculous offer, give him 10 million and try to steal him away. That's how you do it.
Right.
You got to overpay. That's just what it is if you're going to do an offer sheet, right?
It's not a terrible idea, to be honest with you, to get a
Because
guy
well,
like
you
Johnson.
got to
But
think his age, 21, still very young.
yes,
And then also his cap hit 10 million. Sure, it might seem like a lot, but he's already a point a game player at this age, so he's going to get better most likely. And you got to think 10 million now, but 10 million relative to the cap in 8 years or 7 years or 6 years. Like when you're later on the deal, what's 10 million going to look like 6 years from now? It's not going to be as
10
crazy as you
million, right? It's
think.
going to be like 7 today, six
That's
and a
what I
half.
mean, right? So you
Yeah.
got to think about the long term approach if you are going to go that route. I just think Dallas is going to match probably anything another team
Yeah,
throws at them for him. Right?
he's one of their cornerstones of their team.
Oh
So
yeah,
Gabe Velarde, I think for sure is going to get re-signed also.
agreed.
I don't think he really plays center either. I think
Rossi is a guy that's been in
he's
so
an
many
interesting one.
rumors, and I think Minnesota's
He's a
open
guy,
to moving him too.
right? That's what I'm saying. That's the type of RFA that you trade for.
Yeah, you
That you
wouldn't
don't
offer
need to
sheet.
offer sheet. He is interesting. He's undersized, but he's good. Obviously, 51 points, 62 games at a 23-year-old is very good.
One guy too that interests me, especially with Columbus potentially having to resign Provorov and some other ones, is Voronkov. He's
Yeah,
had a pretty good season. I doubt they're going to let him go just because he's so young and he's had really good chemistry with Marchenko. But imagine getting him and Michkov together, like that'd be pretty awesome.
yeah, but I think he's playing wing. I'm pretty sure he's playing left wing.
Oh, okay.
I think so. JJ Paterka, I assume he's going to get re-signed. He's also
He's also on the wing as well.
yeah,
But
also a winger.
he's having a really good season though.
Yeah, Matthew Nyes, can't see him going anywhere.
No,
Capo Caco is probably going to get re-signed. Morgan Geeky is an
having pretty
interesting one, but
yeah. I was just gonna say on Kako, he's doing pretty well with Seattle since they acquired him.
Geeky I think can play center.
He has for
Yeah,
Boston.
Mason McTavish is somebody I'd be definitely interested in, but I don't see Anaheim walking away from him.
No, but that's the guy. That's one where I think you wouldn't pursue through a trade, but you would overpay on the offer sheet to get him, and they might not match it because like I don't know if I want to like overpay based on the point production. It would be a
Yeah.
gamble though for the Flyers because you would overpay him, and then if he doesn't produce, you're kind of stuck, right? So like that's why it's a gamble either way. But McTavish is the type of guy you'd want to target just based on his age, the fact he can play center, and also just that like he's had decent production, but it's not like it's like a point a game where
Right.
oh like I'm gonna have to give you my best prospect to get him, right?
Right. It's theoretically,
Yeah.
Ryan McLeod, I think, would fit Tortorella really well. But I can't see them not re-signing him after trading Savoy to get him.
Yeah.
So I assume he's gonna get re-signed. Alex Laferriere is a winger. Morgan Frost, we
Our
just traded
favorite.
away. Yeah, Bowen Byram is very intriguing, but I assume he's going to get re-signed also. Like again, I don't know how a team who wants to get better is going to be letting guys go.
Yeah, like
Um,
yeah, a lot of these guys. I mean, the only guy really here that I'm seeing that was rumored to move is Dobson, right? So
yeah, like I look at this list, like Sam Miskevich, he's a guy
they're
you might
gonna
be able
they're gonna
to.
sign him though, right? Because like just think about Florida, like they're gonna want cost controlled guys with so many other guys getting raises
Yeah,
due to these cup wins. So like
yeah,
and like we are kind of saying, right? Like there are some interesting names on the RFA market. It's just firstly, is a team actually going to let you steal the player or just match? That's always the risk that you're taking. I just think for the Flyers and the big swing they're looking to make, once again, just looking at UFA, looking at RFA, the trade market just seems like the most viable way to kind of shake it up, right?
yeah. And I don't know all these players that I mean, some of them I do, right? But a lot of these guys will not make it to a
Oh, majority of these guys,
right,
they're
like
under control by their team. They're not going to get
at
let
least
go. They're
80%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
Um,
typical process, for most of these RFAs. Like 80% of RFAs get re-signed by teams while they are in team control. That's just how
Yeah.
it is.
John Beecher is a guy I'd be interested in again, but these guys don't fit the mold of what we're actually like. We have Jet
You don't
Luchenko,
need
which
a
is why,
yeah, you don't need a John Beecher to be a checking center. Like the Flyers have a lot of checking centers at the bottom of
right.
their lineup. They need a highly skilled guy that can play that 1C, 2C role.
So
And
it's really,
that's what we
it's
kind
really
of say
just,
trade
yeah, it's
market's the
really
way to
just
go.
Marco Rossi or Wyatt Johnson. That's
Yeah,
it.
and like Johnson's definitely getting mashed,
Or
and
Mason
Rossi,
McTavish.
yeah, or McTavish and Rossi. I think Rossi could be had in a trade. I just don't know what Minnesota's looking for.
And he's also small, which I don't think the Flyers are trying to be small down the middle.
I
If
think they
you,
want to be big. Yeah.
yeah, 6 foot and up. And I think even 6 foot is like kind of smaller for them. I
And
think
if you
they're
are
really looking
small,
for bigger centers.
and if you are small, you got to be fast. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a kind of prerequisite for that,
Well,
right?
I think that's why Fraser Minton has come up in the Laughton trades because I think he is a guy. While I don't think he's an amazing prospect, he is a guy who's 6'2". He's got size, and like you don't know what he really projects to be. Maybe he's just a third line player, but like if
That'll be
he
useful,
if he's a Tage
nonetheless.
Thompson, Tage Thompson's obviously a monster, but you hope that you can find one of these third line guys that is more than a third line guy. Like this is
Yeah,
what I think the
exactly.
Flyers should be looking for primarily for next year as a bid to hopefully find something better, right? Which is I think why they took on Jacob Peltier, like knowing that Peltier could end up just being like a fourth line, third line player in the NHL, but maybe he'll end up being a top six player, and he's a young guy. You know what I mean? Like doesn't look like it right now, but this stuff happens all the time. Like look at guys like William Karlsson, right? It's like
Yep.
it happens all the time where you find a guy who was slated to be a third line player ended up being a second line player. And like that's really what you're looking for unless you're going for one of these big hitters. But it's not looking great out there. I'll say that. And then let's just take real quick. Let's look at the goaltending market for the NHL. This is not going to be. I'll just do games played. So assuming that Fedotov stays here, I don't see the Flyers really making a pitch at anybody if they manage to, if they're done with Fedotov and they just bury him, which is possible. There are some names out there that could play with Ersson. A lot of these guys will probably get re-signed. Alex Lyon is going to be a free agent. He's probably like a perfect
Yeah, that'd
backup
be interesting.
in the NHL. Anton Forsberg.
Even a Jake
Um,
Allen, I think, is a veteran guy that could take a bulk of games for you
yeah,
potentially.
yeah, it's
I
like
mean,
one of these guys. I would even take Jonathan Quick.
that would be fun.
Vanacek just got traded.
Quick would be so much fun. I just love the way he plays. Even to this day, if you watch the Rangers and Quick's in net, you just have the like me. I played net, so I'm a goalie nerd. So I love to watch goalies. You watch Quick play, it's still the same as LA. It's just so much fun. He's just diving everywhere, and
Yeah, he's
it's
gonna be
awesome.
freaking 39.
It's crazy that he's still playing like that. He's like, I think he's gonna pull a groin or something.
And Marc-Andre Fleury's still playing, which is
He's gonna
also
retire
crazy.
though.
I
This
know,
is last
I know.
season.
Billy
Um,
Husso was just traded, so it's like there are some names out there, but odds are the Flyers are probably going with Fedotov for that last year
yeah, and they
again.
have Kolosov. I don't know what's gonna
Right,
happen there, as we kind of
right.
said.
And then after that, Bjarnason is working his way up, and then you hope by the time Bjarnason is NHL ready that Zavragan is coming over here too, and then you kind of have a three
Headed monster
person,
there.
yeah, you have a three or potentially four-headed monster with Kolosov, and you just like best goalie is the starter, right?
Yeah.
Um, because Bjarnason's probably going to take a couple of years to get
Oh, of course.
NHL
That's
ready,
that's any
and
goalie needs.
Zavragan
Any
is
goalie needs AHL
not
time.
ours. Yeah, and Zavragan, they're going to have to work to get him out of there at the end of his deal.
Yeah.
He's not
But to
coming
be to
early.
be fair with the way that Russia develops goalies, I mean, it's not a bad thing that he's developing where he's at right now because
Yeah,
we've seen how many goalies come from the KHL and look real good, So
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if the same kind of is happening for him just based on how he's played.
yeah. And I don't think the Flyers are giving up on Airson. I don't think they're
No,
even
definitely
close
not.
to that. All right, so that was the deep dive into the roster. Let's take a quick break, and then I'll pull up the not a break, but just my little spiel, and then we'll look at the overall trades that were just made. I don't think there were any made while we were
No,
talking. So
nothing while we were talking. That was a fun exercise though. I feel like the roster building always gives a good look into kind of where the team's at and what, might be on the horizon for them. So we hope you
yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah, and again, when you're looking at these deals and these trades, like know where the Flyers actually sit. Like, are they're not up to the cap, right? We talked about this for a while that it's not this off season, that it's next off season. Follow the money. The money will be available in plethora, but it is very important that they get started now at the trade deadline. Scott Laughton seems to be the odd man out, right? That's kind of what we can take away from this. And this offseason is huge. And the following off season is even bigger. So they have to be ready, in my opinion, that by that following off season, that if there is a big UFA out there, if a guy like Rantanen, if he's not able to be had this off season, right? If there's a guy out there that is a surefire star,
Yeah,
you
the
can
big
go out and
ticket.
get him and sell him on your team, which is even harder to be like, hey, look, all the pieces are in place. Look at the cap we have open. We have a bunch of good young players. We have this. We're already a bubble team. We add you to our team. We're a surefire NHL team. You're 28, 29 years old. You have 6 years left of prime hockey. You know what I mean? And you can sell them on the vision
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's what you really need to
You
do.
you want to sell UFAs and you want to sell players in general. The Flyers and Philadelphia is a destination to go to for the next 5, 10 seasons to kind of be that contending, not first of all, not just perennial playoff team, but also contending team for the cup, right? That's ultimately what they're building towards and hoping to build towards. So I think it starts with this trade deadline, like you said, just subtracting the necessary pieces to make sure you can filter in younger guys and then also have space to add potential pieces, this offseason if you're going to make trades and make deals. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to take a second just to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to this podcast. If you made it this far, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell for notification. Get notified on when we release our episodes. And for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a rating and a follow there as well. That is the best way to support this podcast. So please take a second and do that. Okay, let me pull up the recent transactions list here. So there have been a good amount of trades, and the trade deadline kind of started early this year. We know about a lot of the trade. We've brought up some of them already. There's some AHL deals. We brought up the Billy Husso deal on last episode, so we can kind of skip that. But like, I guess the big one was on March 1st, and that was the Ryan Lindgren trade. So Lindgren, Jimmy Vesey, the famous Jimmy Vesey, Hank Kempf, which is a
AHL player, I
non
believe.
NHL player. And then it was for Yuso Parsainen, who I don't know well, Kevin Dahan, who's obviously an older player.
Journeyman at this point. He's been on
Yeah,
so many teams.
this whole piece was centered around Ryan Lindgren. So they essentially got a second round pick for Lindgren, but they did have to retain 50% of his contract. So it seems like Lindgren just really needed a change of scenery, and maybe going to the Avs was the right move.
Seems also like a sell move for the Rangers, which is interesting.
Well, maybe they needed to free up cap because of JT Miller.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a great point.
I think they've been a little disappointed with their D. If you really look at their back end this year,
Hasn't been
nobody
great.
has
Yeah.
excelled offensively
Adam
outside of
Fox
Fox.
Fox has regressed though, like not from an offensive standpoint, but just like any other aspect of his game. Like he was pretty solid in seasons past defensively. This season he's been atrocious in his own end. So
But they've been playing better since Miller got there, so we'll see. They really hit rock bottom at
they
one
might
point. They
squeak
were at the
in.
bottom of the division, so but I like the JT Miller acquisition. I think that was a good one for him. He's just over a point a game right now, so he's still doing it. So the Gustav Nyquist trade again. When we look at that Scott Lawton trade, they did retain 50% of Nyquist, but he got a 26, which is supposed to be a strong draft, second round pick for Nashville.
I want to see actually what Nyquist's point production is, right? Because like that'll give you maybe a good
It's less than Scott Lawton. I think he's 21 points.
that's what I mean. That might give you a better insight
Yeah.
into what Lawton's gonna get.
I mean, he's older. He's not locked
Yeah,
up
he's
long
got
term.
21 points this season.
He's not
Lawton,
good defensively.
Lawton does have more points this season, more of like a utility type player you kind of plug in a bunch of
Yeah.
different spots.
And he's
Also the
physical.
leadership.
Yeah, very different type of player.
So that's why you compare that and you're like, the Flyers could probably get a better return than that, right?
Yes, I think so too. They don't have to retain for
Exactly.
sure.
This one's a fun one.
Yeah, the Spencer Knight deal. This one was, I was hearing Seth Jones is unmovable, and then he gets traded, and I thought this was a good trade for
To
both
the Stanley
teams.
Cup, Stanley Cup defenders here in Florida, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
well, Panthers are clearly going for it. I think Seth Jones needed a change. He's a good defenseman. He's not worth the money he was being given, but they got 26% retained, so now he's being paid what he should have been paid to begin with, which is about 7 million. Which when I saw he was given 9 million, I made fun of it on this podcast. I was like, "What are you
Yeah,
guys?"
we did.
Same with Darnell Nurse. I was like,
Huge overpays.
"What are you guys doing?"
But for the Panthers and what they're trying to do and win another cup, like this is a guy that might put them over the top. I mean, the fact now that you can have not only Ekblad to munch minutes and
Gustav
yeah,
Forsling.
Forsling, but now you have Jones too. Like
It's a pretty dangerous group.
that's a pretty deep
And
top three there.
they're going for it. So they move their prized like prospect goaltender,
Yeah.
right? Who I think Chicago. I think this was a great move for Chicago because
Yeah.
you can kind of think of it the extra money that they're paying for Jones. That's going for Spencer Knight's contract, right?
Exactly. He had a
So
really good showing to his first game. I think 41 stops on 42 saves. He was locked in. So
yeah, and Panthers move up in the draft in the fourth round pick essentially, swap with Chicago, so they get kind of a more of a third round pick. So it's a pretty even trade actually. I think it works for both sides.
It is another guy too, like Trent Frederick getting traded for Shane LaChance. Obviously New Jersey retains 50% of the contract. And there's more to the pick above. Or
Good,
like more
good
to the
move for
trade.
Edmonton.
Yeah, it was, and it's also another type of Scott Lawton type player off the board, right? Where
Yes.
if you're looking for like a physical, bottom of your lineup type guy you can plug in anywhere. Frederick's off the board, Lawton becomes more enticing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was a good move for Edmonton, but I don't love the 50% retained. So it tells me like maybe the Flyers will have to retain on Lawton
Maybe.
if they want that first round pick. They can afford to do it. It's not going to be a ton of money,
Yeah,
even at
this was
50%.
this was like a 3-team deal actually. It's not like put into place like this. Like if you go up, you see like all the retain of like go up here. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can see all this stuff, right? So it's between Edmonton, New Jersey, and Boston.
Yeah. And then they also got Max Jones, which is also a physical player who I thought was drafted too high in his draft year. But again, I love that Edmonton is getting physical because they're like, we have the high end talent.
That's what they need. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to be able to grind teams down. They saw what happened with Florida, right? Like they're trying to prepare for that. So I
Frederick
thought,
is like a perfect addition for that, right?
Yeah. So again, maybe it's a bigger deal with Lawton. Maybe it's a three-way trade there too. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Then Vitek Vanacek, this just happened. So obviously Florida looking for a goalie.
To
Um,
replace Knight, yeah, as
yeah,
a
to
backup.
Spencer Knight. So they went with a guy who had some good seasons, you know. But Florida's
Vanacek's a
really
solid backup. Sorry.
right. They're really in it to win it. I mean, and I don't blame them. This is their window, right? All their best players are like late 20s, outside of Chuck.
Yeah, and
So
they're gonna be leaning on Bob, obviously, but you just want to make sure if you're Florida, you have somebody there that has
yeah,
NHL experience in case he, potentially gets hurt or something happens. So
yeah, and we'll see if Scott Lawton's really getting close to being moved if he plays tomorrow. You know, that's a
I would imagine just based on what's happening, he sits out, but we shall see, I guess.
yeah. I would sit him out anyway, even if I wasn't trading him, just to if he's
Well, you
up in
never
the air.
know. You just never
Right.
know. Like, in what, God forbid, he gets hurt or something during the game. You just lost out on whatever trade
Yeah,
you're
you
trying to
go
make.
you go
So,
7D man if you have
yeah.
to. You know. Um,
And this was
so
the big one,
this
obviously,
is a
today.
huge trade, and what a return for Seattle. Um, on Bjorkstrand was their all-star representative. He's not
Yeah.
having like an all-star
I
type
do
year, but
I do though
good
just
year.
want to like put it in perspective. Like all these guys like point production this year. Like Yanni Gord in 36 games this season has 17 points. Oliver Bjorkstrand in 61 games is 37 points. Like the fact they got two first rounders for these guys,
And a second.
that's a huge return. Like that is a huge return for guys that aren't producing at an upper echelon rate. Like 37 points for Bjorkstrand once again in 61 games. That's basically like a half point a game. And then you
See,
have 17 points for, and 36 for Gore. That's also like half a point a game. So they're getting first round picks here for almost half a point a game guys, essentially.
yeah, yeah, and to be honest with you though, like Bjorkstrand might be able to put up more points, and same with Gord playing in Tampa
Oh, for
Bay.
sure. For
They
sure.
also put Cam Atkinson on waivers today, so
I also
he's not
too
having a great year.
I
He's
also think
probably retiring.
you gotta factor in Gord won cups with Tampa, two in a
Yeah,
row. So like
huge.
they're obviously looking at him and being like, that's a guy that's gonna fit seamlessly right back into our lineup, knows the system,
Yeah.
essentially is a proven winner, won with us before. So I think just the familiarity aspect for Gord makes it enticing for Tampa, right?
Yeah, and Gord's probably playing fourth line center, and Bjorkstrand is probably playing second line right wing. So it's a big move for Tampa.
I
And
think it makes them like very dangerous to in my opinion.
yes, it definitely makes them a more dangerous team, and they are a dark horse to win the cup. I mean, people forget about them, but and again, they're kind of in the same situation Florida is, where a lot of their best players are hanging around 30. It's like you got to win. You got to win. Like, yeah,
Now's
you're
the
losing.
time.
You're gonna lose those first round picks. That doesn't really matter to you right now because you only have after this you have to reset anyway. Maybe not next year, but maybe the following year,
But
right?
you
And
might as
they're
well
not
go
afraid.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to make big moves. I mean, trading Sergachev was crazy, and then letting Stamkos walk, right? Who's not having a great season in Nashville.
But look at Tampa this season. They're still, third in that division, gonna make the playoffs. And now with this move, looks like they could be, right back in that
Yeah,
contending
I could
position.
tell
So,
you that nobody wants to face Tampa Bay in the playoffs. None of the top teams,
well,
like
oh yeah, because
especially after this.
Vasilevsky gets hot for one series, you're cooked. That's
Yeah,
really, that's really all it takes. And he
and
has the talent and ability to do that at any point. So
and they have lots of goal scorers. With Hagel and
that's what I mean.
and Kucherov, Point,
Kucherov has one really
Gensel.
good series, and you could be finished too, just based on the way he
Yeah.
plays. So
Now they added Bjorkstrand. They made their bottom six better, so it's a good pick for them. Pick up for them. So this is a big deal. And I
this
think
is
this
all
is
that's happened.
we
Yeah.
might see some more trades tonight. It's 8 p.m. as we're wrapping up this podcast. Um, but we'll see if Scott Long gets traded. I really don't know.
I think that's the
50-50.
likeliest. I would be shocked to see anybody but Lawton or Ristolainen traded. Like I don't think there's very many other candidates on the roster to get traded right now. So those are the two main ones, and I think Risto is definitely one that probably is less likely for sure.
I
So it's
I
like
think
likely it's going to be Lawton if anybody does get moved, but we will see.
I think the Risto trade rumors are all fabricated. I don't think there's
Yeah.
any. I don't think there's any chance he's getting traded.
Okay.
I
We
really
shall
don't.
see. We shall
He
see.
could. He could
Yeah.
be because of his age. I understand why people. It's not. Again, I'm not. I'm not even against moving outside of Tyson Forrester, and I really don't want to move Cates and
You could move anybody on this roster if the deal's
right
right,
outside of
potentially.
Michkov. I
Yeah.
would not move Tyson Forrester.
Well, yeah,
I would
I
almost.
agree.
We do not have any big body guys who are potentially a
Yeah.
point per game player who are two way.
Well, just
We
the way
don't
that
have it.
he plays, right? That's a skill set that you're going to want to keep. But yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think the Flyers, looking at this trade board, it's a seller's market. I think, you know, I would imagine like if Yanni Gord can get you a first round pick, I think the Flyers can get a first round pick for Scott Laughton. But we'll just have to see. But I expect just based on you know, these trades and kind of the rumblings we've heard for Dreger, Ken Campbell, that he might be on the move. We'll have to see.
Yeah,
But Friday's going to be really interesting. I think from our perspective, right? Like if there's any big Flyers trades, we might try to have a show and recap
or
it,
at
but
least
we
do a
shall see.
video. Yeah, at least do
Yeah.
a video. Look, if we're wrong and there's a big move, I mean that's a big deal. So, and we
Yeah.
could definitely be wrong. Like
Oh,
I
a thousand
do not
percent. I'm
know
wrong
what
all the
Briere
time.
is going to do. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know what deals are available. I don't know who
Yeah,
he talked about.
there could be trades that or players on the table that we're not even aware of, right? We're not in these rooms, we don't know, but that's what
Yeah.
makes this time of year so interesting because kind of anything can come out of the woodwork and you can kind of be shocked, and that's what
I
makes it
didn't
so fun.
I didn't think Farabee and Frost would get moved in the same deal. Like I didn't
That's
think
what I
that.
mean, right? So anything, that's what I'm saying. Like I think anything could be on the table, so we'll just have to see, right?
And also think about that. If the Flyers don't make a move and you're like sad, they made their trade deadline move like 2 weeks ago, three
Yeah, with the
weeks ago.
Frost Farabee trade.
That
Yeah.
that would if like that would happen during the trade deadline, you would be satisfied, right? So
Mhm.
you can't just be like, oh, it's a trade deadline. If you don't move anything, you failed. There's still an off season and all of that. There's a lot more for this team that they need to do in general. That's why it is a good idea to get started now. But they have to identify who needs to. But we showed you the roster, so like again, I'll show it again. Right, like they're not coming into next year with this
Well,
roster. In my
that's why I
opinion.
think they'll just naturally will be players subtracted, whether it's at the deadline or in the offseason or at the draft. We'll see. But I think it's earmarked for some change on this roster based on what we're seeing here. So I
Yeah,
think, I'm not exactly sure when it's going to happen, but I doubt that it's going to be this exact lineup that we're seeing on the screen right now, right?
yeah, I doubt that as well. All right. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, just thanks to everybody, for tuning in. Like I said, we've seen our listeners and just subscribers and everything over this year really rise. So we just want to give everybody a huge thanks, for supporting us.
For
We're gonna
sure.
have a ton of content, for trade deadline on the Friday. So obviously check out Flyers Nitty Gritty for that. We will have an episode as well, depending on what the Flyers do. If it's a very minor trade or deal, probably not. If it's Scott Laughton or Risto or anybody of that ilk getting traded, you'll probably hear from us on the Friday.
We never brought up Eric Johnson, his potential move, but
No, I mentioned him. I mentioned him.
oh, you did. Okay,
I just said it'll
good.
be up to him if he wants to get traded.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what I would say. Wow, completely skipped that one. Yeah, totally agree with Vasili. Thank you all for listening and everything you guys have done to support us. It's awesome, and it's awesome that we can continue to do this, and hopefully the show keeps growing. And after the trade deadline, we'll start. Well, we don't know where the Flyers are going to finish, but assuming that the Flyers kind of finish in that 6 to 10 range, which is kind of looking where they're going to be.
Draft prep.
Yeah, that draft prep time, like Vasili's saying. So we'll have Steve on probably at least 2 times before the draft, and we'll start digging in. And if the Flyers add a prospect, stuff like that, we'll be talking about him too. All right, that's it for us. Just to remind everybody to please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified when we release our episodes. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a rating and a follow as well. Again, the best way to support our show. And a shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment need. They will help you between you and your insurance company and make it an easier process. Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And a shout out to SportsSpider.com. They are an aggregator of sports content from all over the internet We are partners with them. Our stuff is pinned at the top when we release it. So make sure to check out sportspider.com. Again, thank you everybody for listening. We love you guys. And remember, always stay gritty.